Why didn't I learn that before becoming a teacher? Hi, I'm a music teacher and this is my life. Welcome back to my channel, everyone. In today's video, I will be sharing with you 7 things that I wish I had learned before becoming a high school teacher. Now, in the last 7 years, I have been a substitute teacher or supply teacher. It's the same job, just with a different title. I've also been a long-term occasional teacher who has covered medical leaves or parental leaves, and I am now a permanent teacher at the high school where I currently work. Some of you might be graduating your university programs very soon and are thinking of applying for a teaching degree, or maybe you're closer to finishing your teaching degree and will soon be looking for jobs and applying to school boards. So I hope you find this video helpful, and if you do, make sure that you like this video, subscribe for all the upcoming content, and ring the notification bell to stay up to date on all upcoming videos. With that being said, let's jump into number 1, which is how to plan a field trip. No one explained to me what steps to follow, how it worked, and so I just decided to jump right in and plan my own field trip not too long ago for many students at my school. I don't know why they wouldn't have taught this to us in Teachers College, possibly because the process may have slight variations from school board to school board, but I'm going to try and explain this in a way that I hope will be helpful to as many people as possible. Number 1, it's up to you as the lead teacher to figure out all of the logistics before you go to your principal to ask for approval. So I'll use my trip as an example. I was arranging a field trip for 5 classes of grade 10 students to get tours of government buildings that were available to the public. Now, the good thing was that the tickets for the tours were free, but we did have to book them well in advance and online with a max capacity of 24 people per tour. That means each group needed to have only 23 students and 1 teacher in each group. So the way that it worked out was that I figured out how many students were in all of the classes. All of the teachers were on board with the field trip as long as I did the planning. So I got class lists that had the names of the students. I divided them evenly into 4 different groups. And I had 2 groups start in building A and 2 groups start in building B. They would tour those buildings and then they would switch. So if they were touring building A, they would go to building B. And if they started in building B, they'd go to building A. I had to remember who was in which groups. I had to make sure I was very clear to the teachers of where the building was that they would be starting at, the time that they would start, the time they should be there earlier than the tour to go through security. And on top of that, I also needed to make sure that I sent a list of every student going on the trip to all of the rest of the teachers in the school to please excuse those students from class. I also had to figure out how much the cost for each student was, and that ties in really well with my number 2 point, which is that school budgets are smaller than you think. Now, when it comes to field trips, I understood the fact that I would have to budget the cost of renting 2 yellow school buses to bring us downtown and back to school into the cost of the trip per student. But what I didn't know was that we also had to build in the cost of getting supply teachers to cover our classes while we were out of the building. I had to build that cost into the cost of the field trip. Now, that was really surprising because when I went to go talk to other teachers about that, they said, oh yeah, that's a pretty normal practice because field trips aren't mandatory. They are like an additional way to engage your students in learning. It's an additional experience, but they're not necessary, so they're not really built into budgets. Now, the school was able to say, please let us know if there's any students who can't afford to go on the trip. We don't want money to be the reason why someone doesn't go. And the field trip was around $10 to $12 per student. But still, the fact that we had to build in the cost of supply coverage into the price was really surprising to me. And again, it's one of those things that I never would have found out unless someone had brought it to my attention. The other part of budgeting is that most teachers will pay for their own classroom decoration, so make sure you laminate them, reuse them, right? Try to find ways that you can reuse them as frequently as you can. And also, in the first 6 years of teaching summer school, before I had a permanent job where I had a school board work computer, I had to use my personal laptop and I had to use my own adapters to make sure that the projector in my classroom in the summer school I was working in would be compatible with my personal laptop. So little things like that, unfortunately, end up coming out of our own pocket. The number 3 thing I wish that I had learned before was that sometimes the parents' behavior in communication is worse, sometimes more disrespectful than the students. So sometimes we have students who may make some, off remarks or some rude comments, and we always try to approach those with respect. We always try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they had a rough morning before their school day. Maybe there's something going on in their personal life that we're not aware of. But then you encounter their parents. Maybe it's in a phone call or an email or a parent-teacher interview. Maybe they're upset that their child didn't get as high of a mark as they, as a parent, felt the child should have gotten. And you realize, oh, the student learned it from this place, right? We're all a product of our environment. And so it's really important that, sometimes we take those things with a grain of salt. And this leads into my number 4 point, which is that over time, we as teachers need to develop sort of a thick skin to those comments that are made, whether it's by parents, whether it's by members of the public. The reality is that people who make comments about our jobs, unless they're teachers, they have really no idea about some of the challenges that we deal with as educators and people who work with youth. So sometimes they'll make a comment that maybe they don't realize is as disrespectful as maybe they intended it. There are people out there who will absolutely say rude comments about teachers, but the reality is that we do a lot of things as part of our job, and unless they're a teacher, they won't fully understand. So it's okay to try and develop that thick skin. I know that it's been something that I've been working on over multiple years. The more teaching experience that I have, the easier it gets to be able to handle some of those comments and take them in stride. Number 5 is that as a supply teacher, there are certain things that you have the right to know. Now, of course, lesson plans is one of those things. The first thing that I suggest you do as a supply teacher is the night before you know you're going to teach, or the morning of you're going to teach if you don't find out until the morning, is to check for an email to see if the teacher that you're filling in for has sent you the lesson plan. If you don't see an email, it's okay to go to the school, right? You go to the main office, sign in as a visitor, and say, "Hi, my name is this. I'm filling in for teacher A. Did they leave a copy of the lesson plans?" Sometimes they'll leave them in the office, they might leave them in their classroom, or they might leave them in their department office, right? So a history teacher might leave them in the Canadian World Studies office, or a music teacher might leave them in the music office. Every school has a slightly different process, so it's always a good idea to ask someone in the main office if they have a copy of the lesson plan, but that's only if they have not emailed it to you already, right? It's always a good rule of thumb that before you go into substitute teach, right? It's work, so check your work email ahead of time. Something else that may be really important to ask for is a safety plan. So safety plans are made for students who may have behavior that can become dysregulated, and when that happens, there is a chance that they could injure or harm someone around them or themselves. If someone has a safety plan, there will usually be a shortened version of the name of the student, what grade they're in. It'll likely have a picture of the student so that you know who to look out for, what some of their triggers are, and what steps you can follow. There should also be on that safety plan a way to contact the main office in case of emergencies, some do's and some don'ts. And oftentimes that class will have an educational assistant in there. Hopefully it's an EA who has been there for a while and isn't someone filling in for someone who's sick, because the EAs know the students really well, and this is someone who's going to be extremely helpful to support the students if their behavior becomes dysregulated. But safety plans and lesson plans are essential, so make sure that you ask for those in the main office. Number 6 is that not only is it okay, but it's essential that you work smarter, not harder, when it comes to marking. Now, what do I mean when I say this? Well, I know from my curriculum, I have flexibility in the number of assignments that I give my students and the types of assignments I give my students. I know myself as a teacher, and hopefully you know yourself as a teacher too. There's a good chance that you know what kind of marking you prefer. Now, I don't love marking as part of my job, but I know that it's important. Now, do I prefer to mark written work or presentations and performances? I definitely prefer presentations and performances because it forces me to mark them in the moment on that day. There's no way for me to procrastinate. I cannot fall behind. And so I love it when I can mark the assignment in real time, make some extra comments, and then it's done. And all I have to do is write down the results, and I can then also give the students feedback very quickly with their mark, and that gives them a good idea of how they did on the assignment and the ways that they can improve. Do you need 10 assignments to meet all of the expectations or to evaluate all of the expectations? Or can you do it in 6 evaluations? Or can you spread it across, for example, I am in a high school that has semesters, so over 5 months, right? How many different assignments do you need? Do they all need to be written tests, or can some of them be presentations? Can some of them be written work? Can some of them be, in-class activities that you observe, right? The other thing that's really important is that not every single thing we give our students needs to be for marks. If there's an in-class activity that you want them to engage in, it can be really beneficial just to sell it to them as an opportunity for them to be able to try something new, step out of their comfort zone, and that it's a safe way to make a mistake because they know it's not going to be part of their report card. There are many students in many different schools who are so afraid to make mistakes and take risks and try something new that they freeze and they choose not to do it. Right? And they don't want it to hurt their average or their mark. So it's really important that those activities that are in class, right? Tell them that it's a place where it's okay to make a mistake. Mistakes are such a valuable part of learning. Am I going to plan my field trips a little bit better next time because of the mistakes that I made? Absolutely. And so if mistakes are beneficial for us as adults for learning, it's going to be helpful for your students to have a safe space, a place where they feel comfortable enough to take risks, try something new, and step out of their comfort zone. And my number 7 tip is that finding someone at your workplace that you can talk to, sometimes commiserate with, will make a huge difference for your mental well-being as a teacher. Like I said before, unless someone is a teacher right now or was a teacher before they retired or at least worked in schools, they really don't know all of the ins and outs of the job, of the policies that your board has, the things that are going on in your specific school. And we all have tough work days. We all maybe get bad news or have a rough day. Something happened in our class we wish had gone differently. And just having people that you can talk to, it can be so helpful, right? You can bounce ideas off of each other and try and problem solve, find solutions to the things that you're dealing with. Or maybe you're not alone, and maybe it's just really great to feel like, wow, someone is listening to me who understands because they're going through something similar or they've been through this before. So having someone to talk to who can really relate to your experience is going to be so beneficial, right? Because especially as someone who's working in a new school right now, it is so reassuring and comforting to know that I'm not alone and that teachers as young as me and as experienced as the other teachers in the building are all going through this together, one day at a time. So I hope you found this helpful. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe, and remember to ring the notification bell to stay up to date. And let me know in the comments if you'd like a part 2 to this kind of video, because there are lots of things that I'm sure I could share that I wish that I had known before becoming a teacher. Thanks so much, everyone, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.